Today, we're going to talk about Baseball America's prospect rankings, where the Tigers fall in that. We're going to talk about Witt Jr. being paid. We're going to talk about what the Milwaukee Brewers are doing, kind of how both of those things may impact the Tigers. We're going to talk about the new waiver claim, obviously. Nick Maton being DFA'd, the big news of Monday, all today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Tuesday, February 6th, 2024. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Well, happy Tuesday to all. Haven't said that in a while. Our first Tuesday episode in several months, 2 months, maybe even longer, 2.5 months. We are officially back to 5 episodes a week programming. We have pitchers and catchers reporting next week to Lakeland. We have obviously the rest of the team reporting a few days after that, and then spring activities. And in just a couple of weeks, the end of February, we have spring training baseball to be played. So today, I love shows like today, where we just have a bunch of pieces of news that on their own, none of them are full half-hour conversations, but all of them put together is a fun kind of show where we have a grab bag of stuff to talk about. So I love these kind of shows. This is going to be there's a lot of really fascinating conversations in here. Like I said, we're going to start off with Baseball America's top 100 prospects and then organizational prospect rankings and see where the Tigers fall in there. Witt Jr. gets a bag from the division rival Kansas City Royals. We'll talk about that impact. The Milwaukee Brewers, obviously trading Corbin Burnes to the Baltimore Orioles. We'll talk about kind of the Brewers as a whole and how the Tigers may play into that whole thing. And then we'll end the show by talking about Nick Maton being DFA'd, looking back on the Soto trade as a whole, and talking about the newest member of the Tigers' 40-man roster, Colton Ingram. Okay, so jam-packed show, a lot of fun, small stuff to talk about. Let's start with Baseball America's top 100 prospects that was released. Please go check it out. Support their work. Baseball America, some of the best analysts and prospect coverage in the business, year in and year out. Kind of a pipeline for like prospect evaluating talent. So fantastic place. Go support their work. The biggest thing to come out of this was that the Detroit Tigers found themselves as the 5th ranked team in Baseball America's prospect farm system talent rankings is how they word it. So the Tigers, in Baseball America's eyes, as it stands right now, have the 5th most talent in their farm system in the entire game of baseball. And they've been doing this for 30 or 40 years now. And the only other time in that entire stretch where the Tigers have found themselves that this high was just 3 years ago when Riley Green, Spencer Torkelson, and Mize Manning and Skubal were all prospect status still. So this is a really, really exciting spot to be in. They cite several reasons as to why. One being just the youth that has kind of come through the system lately. Obviously, Colt Keith still technically in the minors. That certainly helps a little bit. But I think the biggest thing was, when Avila's rebuild was very contingent on pitching. And it was very pitching based. And it was, look, we're going to have this crazy good rotation in a few years. We're going to base this entire rebuild off of pitching, and we'll try to find the hitting. Now it's kind of at a turning point where the Tigers' pitching development has been absolutely fantastic. I almost just dropped an F-bomb there. That was a close call. Editing's great. It is fantastic, and it has taken massive strides in the right direction. And you have a really solid group of younger pitchers who are really making names for themselves, and they are drafting bat heavy. And you have seen this organization completely turn the tides and is now deep in the hitting department. Well, deeper. Let's not get crazy with ourselves, but it is deeper than it was certainly in years past, right? Obviously, you have Keith, who we already talked about. You have McGonigal, who everyone's really high on. You have, depending on if you still consider Parker Meadows' prospect status, but even if you're like, no, he's graduated, fine, leave him off of this. Obviously, Max Clark being a big deal, right? Like you have these younger, Justin Henry Malloy, you have these younger kind of influx of offensive talent that you are excited about. So I think that that's a big reason. And on top of adding a lot of bats, finally, after years of just kind of going, Riley Green, Spencer Torkelson, and that was kind of it as far as offense was for a long time. Now you have this influx of bats, and you also have one of the best starting pitching prospects in the entire game of baseball in Jackson Joe. So it's not like all of your cookies are in one jar and you're just kind of going all in on one philosophy. You have this pitching development. You have this kind of, I've said influx 8 times. I was trying to think of a different word, but I couldn't, of bats that you've kind of put into this farm system. And you have the high-end talent, potential at least, in Job. So there's a lot of reasons to be excited. This is fantastic, right? Obviously, you take all rankings with a grain of salt. There's no direct correlation between, like these rankings and like World Series banners raised in the next 5 years or anything like that. But these are people who are really good at their job in evaluating talent and think very highly of your Detroit Tigers organization, which is wild considering just a couple years ago, right, 2022, it took a huge hit and people were really sour on the Tigers' future. And then before 2021, even you go back to 2018-19, really sour. So how far we have come, no one thinks that this organization is like the Orioles prospect pool. Okay, they're the bona fide one. You're not the Dodgers yet. No one is trying to make this anything bigger than what it is, which is one publication's opinion of the Tigers. But it's still exciting, no less. So the Tigers 5th ranked in prospect talent for their farm system. Farm system talent ranking is the exact title. Bobby Witt Jr. gets an absolute bag from the Kansas City Royals in an 11-year deal. We were talking about, I'll pull up the exact terms here. But we were talking a lot about the Colt Keith deal, right? And the implications of the Colt Keith deal, right? You have, here's the exact terms, 11 years, $288.7 million. And if all of the opt-ins and options and incentives are reached, that contract's going to be well over $300 million when it's all said and done. So that contract that Bobby Witt Jr. just got is, I think, something that we should look at more. When people asked me, when Colt Keith got signed, it was, well, when is it Riley Green's turn? When is it Spencer Torkelson's turn? When is it Tarek Skubal's turn for this? This is the deal you look at and compare to more than the Colt Keith deal, because Bobby Witt Jr. has played Major League Baseball and played pretty good Major League Baseball, especially this past year, received MVP votes, right? He struggled his rookie year, had some swing and miss problems, was not doing well defensively, even though he has all the athleticism in the world. Took major strides in both of those departments this past season. Still needs to get his walk numbers way better, in my opinion. I think that's like a pretty big thing, preventing him from taking that true, like, huge leap forward. But without a doubt, took a big step forward this past season. And at one point was he ever the number one, or was he always behind Rutschman? I'm trying to remember the timing on that, because I know him and Adley were 1 and 2 prospects in all of baseball at the same time. And I just can't remember if Rutschman was he called up like right before. I'm just trying to remember the timing for all of it. But regardless, top 2 prospect in baseball. right? If you want a contract to look at and go, oh, like what are the Tigers? And I'm not saying Riley Green's going to get a $300 million deal next year, but that is much more of an indication on these types of deals that you're asking about with Torkelson and Green than Colt Keith's is. Significantly more. You're gonna see a deal much more similar to this one than you are to Colt Keith's. Okay. Let's keep the ball rolling. I got a few more thoughts. Again, we'll just talk about Riley Green, Spencer Torkelson, etc. Kind of what would need to happen for this kind of deal to happen with them. We will talk about all of that right after this. We are talking about eBay Motors. Had a trouble finding the banner there. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at all the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply, and eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2 of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all so much for tuning in as always. As we return to 5 episodes a week, we will obviously be back tomorrow. This is Pacoda week for Baseball Prospectus, so we will be at some point, depending on when the overall standings for Pacoda drop. We always do our Pacoda rankings episode, talk about the win and loss projections for Pacoda, which is always fun. Also a grain of salt thing, but also a fun conversation to have. We'll take a look around the league at everybody's, just see what kind of the more national simulations and analysts and et cetera are feeling about your Detroit Tigers. Also be sure to check out Locked On Sports Today, the 24/7 streaming YouTube channel. Subscribe today to Locked On Sports Today. Okay, so having this kind of conversation about a lot of different things here today. In talking about Bobby Witt Jr., again, want to make it clear, I'm not saying that Riley Green, if he has, gets bit by the injury bug again, can't stay on the field too consistently and plays like he did last year, that the Tigers are going to give him $280 million over 11 years. Not even remotely what I'm trying to say. But if Riley Green goes out there and plays 150 or plays 160 and gets MVP votes, right? If he's good at Bobby Witt Jr. got MVP votes. They were down ballot, right? No one was like, oh, he should win MVP or anything, but he received MVP votes. If Riley Green receives MVP votes and plays for a full season, then I think you're going to start seeing the rumblings of, is an extension worth it? Is it worth it? And this, we don't need to go like super in depth. We kind of talked about this when the Colt Keith thing happened, right? Because that was everybody's immediate kind of knee-jerk reaction. All I'm saying is that Colt Keith's contract is not the one you should be comparing what an extension to Green, if he has a career year, is going to look like. This is much more in line with what you should be considering. Maybe not that rich, right? Maybe not that high. But again, if Green goes out there and is receiving down ballot MVP votes and plays a full season, that's much more similar at a minimum than 28 mil over like 5 years. That is in no way, shape, or form is Riley Green ever going to put pen to paper to something that looks even remotely close to what Colt Keith did. Okay, so that's the only reason I bring it up. Obviously, it has impact with the Detroit Tigers, just competition as well. The Kansas City Royals, that's the biggest contract in Royals history. I think there's a chance, I'll have to double check this, but I'm pretty sure that the Royals may have one of the highest payrolls in the AL Central, if not the highest. It's going to be close. The Twins may still have it edged out. Also, just depending on if you're looking at straight salary or luxury tax hit, those can be two different things maybe. But the Royals went out and spent a decent amount of money this offseason and now put a cherry on top by locking up their, what they believe, franchise shortstop for the next at least 11 seasons. So that'll be something. He made his presence known. There was one game specifically, I don't remember the exact date or anything, but the Tigers were in a close game with the Royals just this past year in 2023, and Bobby Witt Jr. had a infield single that he beat out. Then I want to say stole second and then scored from second on a single to the outfield or something like that. Like he just really made his presence known without doing anything like in the batter's box extraordinarily well. Like it was a rolled over ground ball and he beat it out, and he's just so fast and really took big strides defensively as well. He was really bad. I mean, calling a spade, he was really bad defensively in his rookie year and took big strides in that department. So kid's got a very high ceiling. Again, when he was in the minors, was one of the best prospects in all of baseball, and will be playing against your Detroit Tigers for at least the next 11 years in that baby blue jersey over there in Kansas City. So I think somebody posted that he's going to actually be a Royal longer than Kauffman Stadium is planned to be. So that's kind of funny. Okay, Milwaukee Brewers, really quickly. They trade Corbin Burnes to the Orioles, obviously. The return seems underwhelming a little bit, but something that we have been saying on this show for years now is that obviously pure talent is very important and matters a lot to return value. But what have I said for every trade deadline for the last 3 years to all of y'all? Right? Team control determines value. Burnes has 1 year left and is absolutely testing free agency. So the leverage that the Brewers had to deal him and get a loaded return was minimal because of that. And the only reason I bring this up is because I think, from where I'm sitting, the Brewers over the next year are probably going to be selling pieces away. I think you are looking at Brewers heading into rebuild mode. I've been wrong plenty. I'm sure I'll be wrong again. I know I'll be wrong about plenty more throughout the however long I cover the Detroit Tigers. But the Brewers have full rebuild mode written all over them, at least heading in that direction. People have already started to bring up Willy Adames. I don't know. Obviously everyone has their own opinion on Javi, but I don't know if you can really just like kick him to the curb. I know I can already read like everyone's gonna be like, yes, you can. He sucks. Blah blah blah. I understand. Okay, I know how much Javi struggled last year. I promise. I watched every game. I'm very aware. But I don't think the Tigers are going to do that. Is all I'm trying to say. I don't think the Tigers are going to just boot Javi and trade for eat all of that money and give up assets to trade for Willy Adames. That doesn't seem like something the Tigers will do right now. Maybe, in 3 or 4 months from now, whatever, 6 months from now, we're having a different conversation. But I would not hold my breath on that from, for a Willy Adames trade, which is something that I've already been asked about by multiple people, which surprises me. I'm going to tell you no, that's probably not going to happen. But the Brewers as a whole, if you just look up and down their roster, like this is a roster that is not very far removed from being, a playoff caliber team, obviously, right? Not very far removed at all from being a playoff team. So there are, and they've always been pitching first and offense just be good enough to carry us. But there are pieces that will be available. And I think that they're going to go harder and harder into sell mode at the trade deadline if the first half of their year isn't looking too great, which with Burnes gone and Woodruff on the shelf for the year due to injury, I can't imagine it's going to be an awesome year for the Brewers. So that's a team. All I'm saying is keep an eye on them. That's all I'm saying. Just keep an eye. Keep one eye kind of peeled on the Brewers. See what they're doing. See if there's anybody. Obviously, if you're trying to get a prospect, that's probably not going to happen because that's the whole point of rebuild mode. But if there's somebody starting on their team currently that maybe you have interest in, that's something that we may be able to workshop going forward. Okay. Let's end the show by talking about the newest member of the Detroit Tigers 40-man roster, as well as Nick Maton being DFA'd. We'll do all of that right after this. Happy Super Bowl to all of those who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is about grabbing the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. You have so many fun bets. You have coin toss, you have Gatorade color, you have time of national anthem. There's always so many fun bets for the Super Bowl, and this one is certainly no different with two very polarizing teams in the big game. FanDuel has so many ways you can end your season with a W or 2 or 3. Not only can you bet on who will win Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, and so much more. So new customers can join today and get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Third and final segment of Locked On Tigers. I appreciate you all greatly for tuning in as always. We are talking about the newest member of your Detroit Tigers organization, which is Colton Ingram, left-handed pitcher, pitched with the Angels this past year. To make room for Colton Ingram, Nick Maton has been designated for assignment. We'll obviously talk all about that here in a second. Also, the third move that's going way under the radar here is Devin Sweet did clear waivers and is in AAA Toledo. That's a thumbs up from me. I clearly that's somebody that the Tigers wanted to keep in the organization, and they are. I'm assuming he'll be a reliever for the Mudhens. Cool to keep him in-house here and not lose him to waivers right after you pick him up. So we'll start off with that. Let's move on to Colton Ingram. Not too much here. He is a mid-90s fastball, slider, and then cutter. He does have a changeup that he throws, but it's very few and far between. It's mostly those three pitches, the fastball, slider, cutter. I don't mind that out of a lefty, right? You can throw the cutter maybe a little bit more to righties so that you don't have to throw the slider to righties. Fastball, you go right and left. The fastball is kind of a lower mid-90s fastball, if I didn't already say that. This is a guy that had really good strikeout numbers in the minors last year across double and triple A and combined across double and triple A. Had a sub-3 ERA. I believe it was just under at 2.95. So really solid numbers in the minors. Pitched 5 1/3 innings. That's it for the Angels at the major league level this past year, and an ERA over 8. I want to say he gave up 6 runs in 1/3 of an inning. So that's heavily swayed by one really, really, really rough performance. It wasn't like he was going out there giving up 2 or 3 runs every single outing. There was just one really bad performance he had. It might have been his major league debut, actually. Took his lump there. And then going forward but again, it's like 5 1/3 innings total. So even if like small sample size regardless, but somebody that the Tigers are willing to take a chance on, I'm totally fine with this. I'm fine with this trade-off of him for Nick Maton. We'll talk about Maton here in a second. But the Tigers, when looking kind of objectively, I should probably say subjectively. I don't want to, if you disagree, that's totally fine, obviously. But I think when looking at the roster makeup, this team is still looking to add more left-handed pitching. That's been something they've been looking to add throughout the entire season, or entire offseason, entire winter is what I meant to say. And they have, obviously they brought in Chafin, right? There's talks about Joey Wentz making the team out of camp because he's out of options and is a lefty, right? So you have a team that wants to add more left-handed pitching. That obviously Ingram gives you the opportunity to do that. And in Maton's case, you just have a guy who, I guess we can just kind of transition straight to talking about Maton. Struggled mightily last year. He would tell you that. Anybody who watched the team last year would tell you that. Obviously a great personality, somebody that everybody loved having in the clubhouse, was a fan favorite despite the struggles. Wish him nothing but the best. There's still a very solid chance he stays within the organization. We'll see what happens. But this upcoming season will be 27 years old. He had an OPS of, I believe, 593. It was a sub 600 OPS for the Tigers this past season at the major league level. And on top of his struggles offensively, and this is why I think this and one more reason we'll talk about is why he was the odd man out, is he was also just bad defensively. He was legitimately one of the worst defenders at third base in the entire game of baseball. And for as much as you want to have the conversation about, if you're a believer in Maton, about, if you make so-and-so adjustment, like try and get him to just be able to hit non-fastballs and hit off speed and hit some breaking balls, you could be looking at a totally different player. You're right. That's a huge thing to just fix. Like he literally, for the first couple of months, could not hit anything that wasn't a fastball. So that's much easier said than done for starters. That's a massive adjustment. It's his age 27 season this upcoming year will be. So he's not exactly like a young prospect anymore. And the biggest thing is that he's out of options. We talked about that last week when we did Roster Predictor 1.0, right? Nick Maton out of options, out of major league options. So if he wasn't going to make the team out of camp anyway, you were going to have to put him on waivers anyway. So you might as well clear a 40-man spot, just put him on waivers now. If he clears, he can stay within the organization. You can decide what you want to do with him, right? You can keep him in Toledo if you really want to see if he can make some adjustments this year and maybe return to what you thought he maybe could have been. But I don't think that he is going to be penned in as part of the future plans for the Tigers unless you see him make massive adjustments. And all of that is even contingent on him, again, clearing waivers that he is now going to be put on. So the overarching, my biggest takeaway from Nick Maton being DFA'd is a positive in how I view Scott Harris. That's my biggest takeaway. My biggest takeaway from this is that he is not going to overcommit to mistakes. And I mean, we can take a look at the Gregory Soto trade now, right? And that's the thing about doing what I do for a living, right? Is my takes don't go anywhere, baby, right? My stuff stays and lasts forever. So I got heat as the season went along for being too excited about the Gregory Soto trade. In the moment, I still, didn't think from a pure value perspective that it was some horrific deal. But obviously, hindsight is always 20/20 when talking about baseball because players develop, and you're talking about guys who had spent most of their careers in the minors up to that point, and you didn't know what kind of major league players they were going to be long term. And now you have a much better idea of that. And it's looking like right now that this Gregory Soto trade, the only person left on the 40-man roster is Matt Vierling, who may be your opening day third baseman, which I guess is something. But Nick Maton, no longer on the 40. Donnie Sands, never played a major league game and is no longer on the 40. Still in the organization now. So I think, and like Gregory Soto hasn't been a world beater in Philly, but he's been Gregory Soto, right? He's been, he's still a lefty that throws 100 with movement. And I liked Gregory Soto more than most people while he was here. I'm not bringing up a Gregory Soto argument. Oh my goodness. I can't think of anything less I would rather do than that. I would be okay never having to argue about him ever again. That took the life out of me, having to do that every single game, it felt like, when he was a Tiger. But you look back on that and you got the returns, 2 years later are Matt Vierling. That's pretty much it. You got Matt Vierling for Gregory Soto straight up. And that's up to you as an individual on if you think that's worth it or not. I would probably lean no. I would say no. But that doesn't mean, there's different levels. There's levels to this stuff, man. Right? Like there's different levels to no, right? That Matt Vierling can be a solid utility player for this baseball team and can provide value going forward. And Gregory Soto has immense flaws on the mound, right? So this isn't a pass-fail question. None of these are pass-fail questions. And I feel like just as sports fans, that tends to be the immediate knee-jerk reaction is just like, this is either 100% a failure, 100%, pass with flying colors. I think you probably could have gotten more value for Gregory Soto, but that doesn't mean you're going to get nothing out of it either. But the returns on this don't look great anymore. They don't look awesome. And so that steers me back to my original point, which was my biggest takeaway from this is Scott Harris is not going to keep just pounding his failures and hoping that and playing them nonstop and forcing them to be on the roster and waiting until they turn it around. If he makes a trade that doesn't look great, a year later, or if he is high on a player and that player struggles, he's going to be willing to cut ties relatively quickly, right? I know there's some people that are listening to this and going, Nick Maton should have been DFA'd, 8 months ago. I hear you. I understand. But you have to realize that if we're comparing him to the previous regime, which we should not just be comparing him to Al Avila, because that's a pretty low bar. But if we're comparing him to the previous regime, that was like Al's favorite thing, was just like, I'm going to keep all of my dudes forever, and eventually it'll work out. And that clearly was not the case. And Scott Harris has come in and not only completely turned over all of kind of the bottom feeders of this roster from the Avila era, but he has also now already proven that if somebody is not living up to the standards he thought or that he once put on them, that he is willing to cut bait with them and not keep them around for, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And that's my biggest takeaway. That's my biggest thumbs up from this news is just, Ingram, we'll see. He may never pitch in the major leagues. We don't know. He's a waiver claim. He could be Tyler Holton. He could be, somebody, again, that we never see. Only time will tell. They added a lefty pitcher. They wanted to do that. Good job. But the biggest thing for me is just an ability to look objectively at people that you brought in and still be willing to look in the mirror and go, you know what? This did not work out how I thought it was going to work out. And I can swallow my pride and cut bait and cut ties with this move or this player, etc. Okay, so that's my biggest takeaway from it. Thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day, free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will be back tomorrow, baby. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. Let me know what y'all think about everything I talked about today. Back to 5 days a week, baby. We're back. We ball. Go Tigers.